I was finishing a double shift at Ashvale Aid Station when the sky tore open over the ridge. Ashvale wasn't much. 3 prefab domes bolted to a moon nobody wanted, sitting in the no-man's gap between 2 warring reaches. The dust out there was the color of old rust, and the cold came up through the floor plating, no matter how many heaters we bolted to the walls. Our charter was simple: treat whoever came through the door, ask nothing, report nothing. I'd run that charter for 6 years, long enough that the war's politics had stopped meaning anything to me. I'd watched fronts shift and treaties rewritten, and never once changed how I worked a triage line. I patched humans. I patched Tholen. I'd patched things I still couldn't name, things that came through the door speaking languages my translator chip couldn't parse. And I treated them anyway, because a wound doesn't care what flag you fly. That was the job. And some nights, it was the only thing I had left to believe in. The ship that came down that night wasn't a warbird. It was a slim courier, Tholen made, trailing fire from a hole in its hull, and it didn't so much land as stop falling. I was halfway to the wreck before the dust settled, because that was the job too. She was alive. Barely. Slate blue skin gone gray at the edges, black hair matted with blood at the temple, one arm bent wrong beneath her. Her eyes opened when I got my hands under her. Dark, almost black, with that faint reflective shimmer the Tholen have, the kind that catches light like still water. She looked at me the way you look at something you've already decided is going to hurt you. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said, in the flat trade pigeon every border medic learns. "I'm going to carry you now." She didn't fight me. That told me more than anything. Tholen don't yield easy, not even half dead. I got her onto the litter and back through the airlock before the second ship passed overhead. Low and dark, running no lights. Hunting lights off. That's a search pattern, not a rescue pattern. I'd seen enough of both to know the difference. I didn't ask who she was. I cut her out of a flight suit stitched with rank markings I didn't recognize, packed the wound in her side, set the arm, and ran a scanner over her to make sure nothing vital had torn loose. The scanner blinked back a designation I'd never seen on a civilian, something coded and clipped, the kind of string that gets redacted before a medic ever sees it. I didn't push the second screen to find out more. Wasn't my business. My business was the bleeding. She came around twice during the night. The first time, she tried to sit up and ask me something fast and sharp in Tholen proper, no pigeon, and when I didn't understand she went still, with a kind of weary disappointment, like she'd expected better luck. The second time, near midnight, she was quieter. "Why?" she said, in pigeon this time, slow like she was relearning the shape of it. "Why help?" "You were bleeding on my floor," I said. "Wasn't a hard call?" "You don't know what I am." "I know what you are right now. You're my patient." I checked the line in her arm, kept my hands steady, kept my voice level. The voice I use on every scared thing that comes through that door, soldier or civilian, human or not. That's enough for tonight. She didn't answer that, but something in her face eased, just slightly, the wariness sliding down a notch the way it does when a person realizes you're not measuring them for use. I found a thermal blanket in the supply locker, the kind we kept for shock cases, and laid it over her without asking. She watched my hands the whole time, like she was waiting for the catch, the price that always came tucked inside a kindness. I poured a cup of broth from the warmer instead, and set it where she could reach it if she wanted it, then went back to charting her vitals, and let the silence do the rest of the talking. The hunters came at the 3rd hour past midnight. 2 of them, armored in matte black, the kind of gear that doesn't reflect scanner light. They didn't knock. They came through the outer dome asking, in clipped, perfect pigeon, whether I'd recovered wreckage personnel from a downed courier. I told them I'd recovered a patient, and that my charter didn't require me to discuss patients with anyone not holding a medical writ. One of them looked past me into the recovery bay, where I'd already pulled the privacy screen across her cot, and for a long 3 seconds, I thought that screen was the only thing standing between her and whatever they'd been sent to finish. "Station's under treaty protection," I said. "You want to search it, you bring a writ from the compact, signed and dated. Otherwise you're trespassing on neutral ground, and I log every name that walks through that door." It wasn't bravery. It was procedure, the kind I'd recited 100 times to drunk soldiers and angry officers who wanted me to hand over a body before I'd finished saving it. But these 2 weren't drunk soldiers. They were hunting someone specific, and they knew exactly how close they were. They left. Not because they believed me, because they couldn't prove I was lying without burning a treaty violation they weren't authorized to burn. I watched their flyer's lights climb back into the dark and didn't breathe right again until they were gone. My hands were shaking by the time I locked the outer door, and I stood there a moment longer than I needed to, listening for the sound of them circling back, because men like that didn't always honor a closed door the first time they were told no. When I pulled the screen back, she was awake, watching me with those dark, still eyes, wide now in a way that had nothing to do with pain. "You knew," she said, "what they were." I knew enough. I sat down on the stool beside her cot, tired in the way that goes bone deep after a night like that. "Figured you'd tell me the rest when you were ready. Or not. Either way, I wasn't handing you out that door. You don't even know my name." "Then tell me," I said. "Or don't. I'll still be here when the sun comes up." She was quiet a long moment, studying my face the way you'd study a stranger's hands, before deciding whether to trust them with something breakable. Then she reached into the collar of the flight suit I'd cut from her and worked something free. A half-disc of dark metal, broken clean across its face, etched with a design I didn't recognize. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it with her good hand. "My name is Issa," she said. "My brother sits on a throne that isn't his. That seal was my mother's. He has the other half. If his people find this on me, it proves who I am, and they kill me cleanly instead of calling it an accident. If your people find it on you," her mouth curved, faint and tired, "they'll wonder why a border medic is carrying a piece of the Varel crown." "I won't leave you holding nothing," I said, "whatever this costs." Dawn came gray and slow over the ridge, and with it came a second ship, not black-armored, not running dark. A Tholan cruiser flying a banner I didn't know, escorted by 6 fighters that broke formation the second their scanners read her signature inside my walls. I stood in the airlock with my hands open and empty, the broken seal still warm in my pocket, ready to argue treaty law to whoever stepped through that door, same as I had 1,000 times before for 1,000 lesser stakes. I didn't have to. The first man through dropped to one knee the moment he saw her standing behind me, and said her name like a man saying a prayer he'd given up on. More followed behind him, a dozen at least, and every one of them went still at the sight of her, some old grief in their faces giving way to something I didn't have a word for in any language I spoke. Issa answered them in Tholan proper, steady now, every inch the woman who'd told 2 hunters' superiors where to put their writ, and the years of running this charter alone suddenly felt very small against whatever weight she carried back into that crowd. Then she turned back to me and held out her hand, palm up. I gave her the broken seal. She closed her fingers around it, looked at it a long moment, and then closed her other hand around mine instead. Not the gesture of a queen accepting tribute, just a woman closing her hand around a stranger's because she meant to keep doing it. "Come with us," she said. "Not as a prize, not as a debt repaid, as the man who didn't ask what I was worth before he decided I was worth keeping alive." "I told you I wouldn't leave you holding nothing," I said. "Then don't start now." I looked back once at Ashvale's 3 battered domes, 6 years of asking nothing and reporting nothing, and found I wasn't sorry to leave them behind. I followed her up the ramp into the gray morning light, her hand still around mine, and didn't look back again.